So Hillary Clinton this morning accused Donald Trump, this from thehill.com, Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton early Monday accused Donald Trump of inspiring acts of terrorism through his rhetoric, saying her Republican rival is turning the fight against terror into a religious war with Islam and that threatens U.S. safety, which is the same thing that I was just saying a minute ago. I think she said it better. She said, we know that a lot of rhetoric we've heard from Donald Trump has been seized on by terrorists, in particular ISIS, because they're looking to make this into a war against Islam rather than a war against jihadists. Violent terrorists, people who number in the tens of thousands, not tens of millions, they want to use that to recruit more fighters to turn this into a religious conflict. That's why I've been very clear, says Hillary Clinton this morning. We are going after the bad guys, and we're going to get them, but we're not going after an entire religion, and we're not going to give the terrorists exactly what they want in order for them to enhance their position. Second, we know Donald Trump's comments have been used online in recruitments for terrorists. The kind of language and rhetoric Trump has used is giving comfort to our adversaries. Wow. Comfort. I think aid and comfort is the definition of treason, or one of them. It's pretty amazing. So I completely agree. There is a problem in Islam. Let's acknowledge that. And that problem comes out of something called Wahhabism, which is it's like one of the, it's a small strain within the larger Sunni part of Islam that is particularly pernicious. Just like, within Protestant Christianity, you've got, individual cults and sects and denominations. I mean, but the whole Jim Jones thing, I think that's probably the best analogy. You get these fundamentalist preachers who then just go off the edge, go off the rails, and end up killing people and doing terrible things. So it's not the religion, it's the extremism. And that extremism is being played like a fiddle by Trump and the other neocons who want to, and Fox so-called news and right-wing hate media, in large part because it fits into their narrative of victimhood as well. Meanwhile, 29% of Americans 18 to 34, according to a recent Quinnipiac poll, 29% of millennials, basically, Americans between the ages of 18 and 34, almost a third, are seriously considering Gary Johnson. And Paul Krugman today writes, does it make sense to vote for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate for president? Sure, but you have to believe that America will be better off in the long run if we eliminate environmental regulation, if we abolish the income tax, if we do away with public schools, if we dismantle Social Security and Medicare, because that is what the Libertarian platform calls for. I'm quoting Paul Krugman. It calls for abolition of the income tax and the privatization of almost everything the government does, including education. With regard to the environment, it opposes any kind of regulation. Instead, it argues you can rely on the courts. Is a giant corporation poisoning the air you breathe or the water you drink? Just sue them. As the Libertarian platform says, quote, where damages can be proven and quantified in a court of law, restitution to the injured parties must be required, end quote. Ordinary citizens are up against teams of high-priced corporate lawyers. What could possibly go wrong? Asks Paul Krugman. He says, meanwhile, Mrs. Clinton has staked out the most progressive policy positions ever advocated by a presidential candidate. I think that's hyperbole. I don't think that her positions are quite as progressive as Franklin Roosevelt's were in his second, third, and fourth presidential terms, particularly his fourth term. But she's, I think, far more progressive than was John Kerry, than was Al Gore, certainly than was her husband. I think she's arguably more progressive than Michael Dukakis. I mean, the positions, the issues have changed somewhat. Now we've got student loan debt because Reaganomics hadn't really devastated the middle class when Dukakis was running against Bush Sr. back in the day. Reaganomics was just beginning to take hold. So the whole trade stuff, the whole environment stuff, you know, was just starting to get on the radar. But in the modern era, in the lifetime of these millennials, certainly Hillary Clinton's positions are more progressive than we've seen from any Democrat running for president. And Paul Krugman goes on to say, there's no reason to believe that these positions are insincere, that she would revert to 1990s politics in office. What some are now calling the new liberal economics has sunk deep roots in the Democratic Party and dominates the ranks of Mrs. Clinton's advisors. And if that's the case, that's great. But basically he's pointing out, you know, had Ralph Nader not been in the race in 2000, Al Gore would have been president. Certainly that's the case in New Hampshire, and you know, you can build a case that that was the case in Florida, although I think that Florida, really, we cannot forget that Jeb Bush knocked 50 to 90,000 African Americans off the voting rolls, specifically to make it possible for his brother to win Florida. And he and Katherine Harris committed a crime against democracy, which Chris Kobach in Kansas now is replicating in other red-controlled, you know, Republican-controlled states across the country. But that almost a third of young Americans 18 to 34 do not realize that Gary Johnson wants to do away with public schools. You know, you're concerned about your student loan debt? Forget that. It's going to get a hell of a lot worse with Gary Johnson, because there'll be no funds to help you out. Sorry. No public schools. No public college. Hillary Clinton wants to make it for every family that makes less than $125,000. College is free. Anyhow, we'll pick up your calls after the break. Stick around.